Hi, I'm Stacy Hyde, and I'm back for another episode of Better Financial Health in 15 Minutes or Less. And I'm going to kick off a series of three podcasts, kind of talking more deeply into what it means to retire with between $1 and $5 million of net worth, kind of the key things that you need to be thinking about. Um, because if you're in this cohort and you have accumulated $1 to $5 million of liquid net worth. What do I mean by that? I mean, you've got money in your 401k, you've got money in investment accounts, maybe you have some restricted stock units from your employer. You've done a great job of accumulating money, which puts you in the top 1 to 3% of folks in the country. But the key thing is you want to make sure that you enjoy that. And just beyond having a diversified portfolio, there's things that are going to become very important as you move through. We're going to touch on things like taxes. We're going to touch on things like healthcare, Medicare, Social Security, Roth conversions. These are all very key items that. And why do I say these things are so important? Well, even in the year you retire, the timing of when you retire can have big implications. What do I mean by that? Maybe you need to stay until February or to July 1, depending on your role in your company, to qualify you for a profit sharing contribution or to have additional round of restricted stock units vest. That can be very, very important as far as the timing. And it's even important to understand the nuances of how your health care is going to continue. Does it go through the end of the month? Does it stop covering you the day you stop working? So maybe you want to stretch out your vacation. Because guess what? A lot of folks retire before age 65. 65 is not full Social Security retirement age anymore. For most people, it's 67, but 65 is still when Medicare starts. So if you're leaving your company early and you're not fortunate enough to have worked for or have a spouse that worked for a school system or a government agency that is going to allow you to keep your health care at rates similar to or just slightly more than what you had as a full-time employee, then healthcare is often going to be a very big expense in retirement. There's different ways you can get that. You can get it through the exchange, also known as Obamacare, healthcare.gov. Pro tip, when you go to that website, it will ask you for, they have to cover anyone. So if you've had cancer or you've got heart disease or something like that, it is a very good way to get coverage. It's going to be expensive and the deductibles are likely to be quite high unless, of course, you can manage your income. Other alternatives, depending on the state you live in, is Blue Cross or other large insurers like that have some individual health policies. Some of them are qualified on the exchange, which means they're also available on healthcare.gov. Some, such as a policy offered in Tennessee through Farm Bureau, it's actually a United Healthcare product, but it's underwritten, which means that if you have certain health conditions, those are going to be excluded for a period of time, but it is real health insurance that can have very affordable premiums, very good coverage, and a large network of providers. Your company may also have some early retiree health insurance that, on the face of it's expensive, but can be very good, and it's a network that you're likely already familiar with. The key thing here is that's why the finances of retirement, you have this overall pot of money, and some of it is pre-tax, hopefully some of it's Roth, some of it's after tax. But how do you turn this pot of money or pots of money into income. Most people have heard of the 4% rule, but the devil's in the details here. Which bucket do you pull from? It's important to pay attention to tax brackets because, believe it or not, when you are retired, you have probably more control over your tax bracket than you've ever had in your life up until this point. But that brings up the next question, because if you were a top performing executive, high earner, you're making six figures, maybe even seven, and all of a sudden you're retired. Well, you think, wow, okay, I've always minimized taxes. But minimizing taxes in those first few years of retirement before your required minimum distributions kick in may actually cause your overall tax liability over your lifetime to increase dramatically. What do I mean by that? If you absolutely positively minimize taxes as soon as you retire, say you retired at 60 until you're 75 when your required minimum distributions start, if that's the case, then what's going to happen as soon as those required minimum distributions kick in, you're likely going to jump into a, maybe a 30 something percent tax bracket. And oh, by the way, your Medicare premiums are also going to jump up as well. So there's a lot of different items that you need to be looking at. It's not just, okay, this much in international, this much in small caps. Real finance is getting asset location. Which type of account do I own? Which types of securities in? Where do I draw my funds? And how do we manage my tax burden over the whole arc of my retirement? So it is asset allocation, of course. How much risk can you take? It's also how much variability can you accept in that income? And it's also making sure that the health care is right. You've made the correct Social Security claiming decisions. And you really want to make sure you've got all of that pulled together. That's where a firm like ours can really come in and help you. Because we hear a lot about beating an index when we're investing. Did my investments do better than the S&P 500, or did I own the right allocation within the Mag 7 stocks? But really, once you sit down and think about it, what are your goals? What are you going to be using that money for? Do you want to travel? Do you want a second home? Do you want to pay for grandchildren's education? Do you just not want to worry about money? What does that mean to you? And that's what we're going to talk about as we go through these next few episodes. So thanks for tuning in. And this has been another episode of Better Financial Health in 15 Minutes or Less.